Talking to your users is crucial to validate your problem, but also to get to know them. You really need to take some time to understand who they are, what their lives are like, and how your product will fit in their lives. Like Henry Ford said, if there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as from your own. Hang out while users hang out to understand the context of use of your product. Do the things they do to understand their constraints. For instance, if you're working on a GPS, you have to spend some time in a car, on a highway, on a countryside dirt road, stuck in traffic in the city. Sometimes you can use your hands, sometimes you can't. So you might have to consider voice input, and this will be a design challenge you'll have to face. A good way of keeping your user in mind when you design your product is to use personas. It's also a good tool to keep track of what you learn by your users. Personas are models used to represent your users that will help guide decisions about product features, interface, and even visual design. It's basically a canvas that you will fill with details about your target's profile. But once again, personas are intended to serve as surrogates of real potential users, to remind you of them when you're not in front of them. They shouldn't become an excuse to not work face-to-face with real users. The canvas is made of 4 blocks: facts, pain, behavior, and goals. The best way to use this tool is to first build a proto-persona. Proto-persona is a prototype of the final persona. It is our best guess as to who our user is. It is the customer hypothesis in a more detailed way. So let's start filling the canvas with our hypothesis. The first block is facts. Facts are factual relevant informations about our user. As you might recall from the last video, we said that our user is likely to be a college student, so 18 to 23. He has an intense activity on Facebook, notably sharing pictures, and he also owns a smartphone. Defining all this also allows us to know exactly who we want to interview. Next block is pain. For now, we don't need to give too many details. The pain is our problem hypothesis. And you might recall from the previous video that our first hypothesis was that sharing pictures from your phone is complicated. Next up is the behavior the user currently exhibits because he doesn't have our solution. So for us, it will be that he keeps most of his pictures on his phone and shares very few of them, and that he sometimes sends phone pictures by text to his friends when he wants to make sure they see them. And finally, what goal is the potential user trying to accomplish through the behavior that our solution will do better? This is really important and really interesting, but not always clear or easy to find. The question we're trying to answer here is not what are they trying to accomplish, but why. It's a first step in the understanding of the user psychology. And understanding your user psychology is a huge asset in design and in business. Did you know that Mark Zuckerberg's major in college was psychology? So why are college students sending pictures to their friend by text? I think a fair guess would be that they're trying to get feedback and approbation. You could put a lot of things about your user in the persona, so stay focused on information relevant to the problem and potential product you're working on. Keep in mind that all demographic informations are not always interesting. Focus on those who predict a specific type of behavior. For example, there might be cases where the age or line of work of the persona doesn't imply much, while the fact that they have a specific device like a smartphone really does. Once your proto-persona is ready, and this shouldn't take more than an hour, you can proceed to the interview in order to validate the problem and the persona. Allow me to give you a few tips for these interviews. First, talk to your target. Find people who correspond to your persona and get out of the building and go talk to them in person. And talk to them one-on-one. Define your goals and keep them in mind. Here your goal is not to pitch your solution. You're not trying to convince anyone. You want to make sure the problem you've identified is real, and you want to get to know your potential users better. Get ready to hear things you don't want to hear. Actually, help people tell you things you don't want to hear. Ask open-ended questions. This is really important. When asking about the problem, don't ask people, "Do you have this problem?" But rather, "Can you tell me about the last time you did," and you insert the action that would lead to the problem. And once the person answers, you can add, "Okay, and did you face any problems while doing this?" Always rephrase what people tell you. This is a great technique, maybe the greatest of them all. It will allow you to make sure you understood what the person told you and also give them an opportunity to add details. Look for insights and make sure to write them down. They'll be useful to refine your persona and useful when you start thinking about a solution once you've validated your problem. Validate with currency. The best form of currency is money. If you can find people willing to give you money because they want you to solve the problem, even though your solution doesn't exist yet, this means this problem is worth being tackled. But currency can also be email addresses or phone numbers from people who really want to hear from you once your solution is ready. And finally, refine your hypotheses and go test the new ones. This getting out of the building might take some time, and you might have to refine your hypotheses several times. But this is great, this will bring you a lot of insights. Once you've validated your problem and customer hypothesis, you can go back to your persona and fill it with everything you've learned. So let's see what ours would be like. We'll start by writing down the problem we've validated just above the persona. Now let's talk about the facts. It's important to give a name to your persona. You can even add a photo or draw a picture. This persona is going to become your best friend, and it's always easier when friends have a name and a face, right? So we'll call our persona Kevin. It's not necessarily a college student. He's actually more likely to be 25 and to work in a startup. And he does own a smartphone and share pictures on Facebook from his computer. But most of the time they were taken with his real camera. Next block is pain. Here we can add details about the problem that the people we've interviewed have told us about. These details are clues about how we should solve the problem. So yeah, phone pictures don't look good, but Kevin doesn't always have his camera with him. And sharing pictures is complicated. Also, there's too much going on Facebook, and pictures taken by friends are lost in the middle of a lot of informations. In the behavior block, we can write down that we've learned that our typical user uses Photoshop to enhance his pictures, but not for phone pictures, for pictures taken with his camera. The next two hypotheses were right, so we can leave them here. And also we've learned that Kevin, the typical user, puts pictures on photo networks like Flickr, but he doesn't really get his friend attention there. And finally, the goals for Kevin are indeed to get feedback and approbation, and he wants to look cool and show his artistic talents. Just to be clear, this is not the result of what Instagram did. This is just an example. Actually, Instagram is a pivot of Bourbon, a check-in app like Foursquare. With time, you probably have more than one type of people using your product. But for now, stick to one persona, or two if you're working on a two-sided market. But that's the only exception. Alright, it's time for you to work now. Start by filling your persona. You can find the canvas in the folder of this lesson in the files you've downloading at the beginning of this course. Get out and talk to potential users as soon as you can. And keep in mind that you have two goals: test your problem and understand the potential users. Take notes and refine your hypothesis. If you're only working on a small idea for the purpose of this course, you might not need to do all that, but it would be a great training for your future projects. However, if you're working on a real business hypothesis, I strongly suggest that you validate that the pain you've chosen to solve really exists, and that it exists for a category of people that you really understand. Of course, this is not something you should do only once. Looking for feedback from users is one of the core activities of a good designer. Each step of your workflow should be punctuated by talks with users or potential users.